Hey everyone, this is Bunny, and today we're talking about one of my favorite painting techniques, dry brushing. If you want to add quick highlights and bring out the details in your miniatures without spending hours layering and blending, dry brushing is your best friend. It's quick, it's easy. This technique will speed up your painting process while still giving you really awesome looking minis. So let's jump right in. So what is dry brushing? Well, dry brushing is a simple highlighting technique where you take a really dry brush, hence dry brushing, and a really small amount of paint, remove most of the paint from the brush, and then lightly drag it over the raised areas of your mini. Now we're going to put this tree off to the side. We're not going to dry brush him. We're going to dry brush this guy just so you can see the difference, because dry brushing is essentially very subtle. Okay, this makes the details pop by catching the edges with a lighter color, giving you kind of depth and texture. Now in this case, we are doing a tree and it has a lot of raised areas, so you'll be able to see really well what the dry brushing does. We have painted a base color, done a wash on top, and now we are going to highlight all these ridges using some dry brushing. This is a perfect technique for stone, cloth, fur, armor, and yes, wood. It allows you just to bring out the detail. So you don't need much to dry brush, but the right tools do make it easier. The first thing you're going to need is a dry brush. It does not have to be a specific dry brushing brush. This brush is like destroyed, okay? Just use an old wrecked brush. Something where you can get a little paint on the end and you could just blah, 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 all over that model, but it's not a precious brush because these get beat up. So I use this brush for dry brushing. I also use it for slapping on base layers because it's old and it's wrecked and it's not good for detail of any kind, but it makes a handy dry brush. So you can use anything that is kind of soft. It can be wide, it can be round, it can be flat, it doesn't matter. Just an old worn out brush. You can also use an old makeup brush. If you have an old makeup brush you were going to throw away, give it a good clean, let it dry, bang, it's your dry brush. The next thing you want is a paper towel, which I have off to the side here. Okay, I'm just moving that out of my way. But I have a paper towel off to the side. And that is for removing excess paint. Basically, when I get paint on my bristles, before I come over here and blah, 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 I go boop, 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 boop to get the extra paint off. Okay, that's an important technique, the boops. Got to boop off that paint. You're also going to need somewhere to put your paint. So I have a little bit of brown paint on here. We're going to do 2 layers of washing. We're going to do brown and gold. So I have a little bit of brown paint on my palette, so I will go from the palette to the boops on the paper towel to the model. You also need paint. You generally want a lighter color unless your model is really, really light and you're deliberately darkening it. You generally want a lighter color than your base color. So this is a really deep brown, like so brown it's almost gray. So I'm going to use brown and then gold to lift those highlights. Okay, so you generally want to use a lighter color over a darker base coat. So you can buy specific brushes that are dry brushes. You can do that. They're a little different from regular brushes. They're a little bit stiffer. They spread the paint more evenly, but you don't need to do that. Okay, you can just use an old wrecked brush that you happen to already have. That's okay. So let's actually see dry brushing in action. I've got this mini here, base coated in a nice dark deep brown. So now we're going to load my brush, get some paint, not much paint on the brush, just a little bit of paint, but that's still going to be too much. So I'm boop, 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 boop. Okay, boop, 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 just boop. You got to boop first. Then you're going to take your mini. Okay, trick is to remove almost all of your paint so it looks like there's nothing left. If you're doing it right, it'll look like there's no paint on your brush. Like it looks like, oh, it's just stained with paint. It's not actual drops of paint. That's good. We want that. Now we want light strokes. Okay? Light strokes. You're not going to blah, because that's no good. Light strokes go in the, so the grain of the bark runs like this. So I'm actually going to go this way. Just light. Start high. Come in. There you go. Starting to hit. But you always start up high and start your motion, because then you can see how far down you have to come. If you start right here, you're going to be too close. So start high. Get in there with that color. And then as the paint comes off your brush, you can actually get your brush closer But initially you want to be very, very, very light because you're just wiping off. Now I'm just going to go pick up some of my booped paint. You're going to have to re-dip your brush a lot because essentially you're taking off most of the paint off your brush. That's what you wanted to do. But because you're taking off most of the paint, you're left with very little paint on your brush, which necessitates dipping your brush way more often. So we're just going to get all these branches. Remember, we're not painting. We're just giving a light brown cast. And also dry brushing dries really fast because you actually don't have very much paint. There's hardly any paint on here. Hardly anything happening. Because there's hardly any paint, it'll dry in just a few minutes. So we'll be able to proceed with another coat fairly fast. Just turn this guy around. Get a little more on our brush. And again, start high. And then move in. Move in. Okay. Get all those parts you haven't gotten already. So I do tend to do dry brushing in one pass. I know usually when I'm painting, I do part of it later. I do half the model. But because dry brushing dries so fast, there's really not a whole lot of reason to do that. Dog is choking on her own spit. But there's really not a ton of reason to wait, so I don't really need to sit here and let it dry and then flip it, and I just flip it in my hands because the other side's already pretty close to dry. So then you take a look at your model, see if there's anywhere you'd like to get a little more paint, a little more of a cast, and kind of hit those spots. Let's see if there's anything you'd like to jazz up. Okay, we're going to call that good, and we're not cleaning our brush in between when we're dipping, because if we clean our brush, it's not dry anymore. You have to use a dry brush. That's why it's called dry brushing. You want to use quick, gentle strokes, almost like you're dusting a surface. Don't press too hard or you'll get streaks instead of a nice little cast. And you want to build up your colors. So as soon as this is dry, we'll run back and we will do a lighter color. Okay, we will do a lighter color. We're not doing a lighter color right now because we just want that to set a minute. Okay, so we will come back and add another layer with a slightly lighter color. All right, our base coat is now dry. So I'm just going to bop the brown off my brush, get a little gold on here, bop the gold off. Then we're going to take the gold, and we're not going to go as full coverage as we did the brown. We're just going to go the really high parts. Okay, so we're not going to go as deep. Just a little bit of gold to bring out the highlights here. Get some more paint from my boops. And yes, it's officially called boops. That's the official painting terminology. It's a boop. So then we're going to give this a gold cast, and I am making like an enchanted tree. That's why I'm picking silvers and golds. If you're painting a tree, you might have used different colors. Doesn't matter. We're dry brushing. It doesn't matter what our model was. The dry brushing technique remains the same. Get some paint on that side. Get some underpaint underneath. Flip it over. It literally dries so fast. So because you're hardly using any paint. So unlike when you're doing entire layers, I want thicker there. I need more paint. I want thicker. I want thicker. I want this side. I want this area thick. Not like thick, but I want enough paint on the actual base trunk that it really stands out. The branches, I don't care as much. Branches, I don't care as much, but I do care about the trunk. I want to have a fairly golden cast. And then again, set your model down. take a look. Do you like that? Do you want more colors? Do you want to do more layers? That's really what it is. You can layer colors to get an even cooler effect. Start with a mid-tone, then go lighter with each layer for more depth. So you can see this is the one that just has the base coat and the wash, and this is the one that has that and 2 layers of dry brushing. It really starts to stand out. So this is fine. You don't have to dry brush. If you like this, then that's what you go with. Dry brushing is just an extra technique in your arsenal, so you can really highlight areas. You can even, like I did, more highlighting on the trunk than I did on the branches. The branches have some, but it's really the trunk I wanted to have that gold cast. So I have a lot of gold on there, and I have less on the limbs. But you can do it however you like. Just remember, very, very little paint. Okay, very little paint. Look at the difference. Dry brushing instantly brings out these really beautiful, beautiful details on your model, and it makes it just look a little bit less flat. Okay, now let's talk about common mistakes you might make when you're dry brushing. If your mini looks chalky or streaky, you might be using too much paint. The fix? Well, first of all, boop off that paint before you get going. Okay, make sure you're booping off that paint. So you can also wipe off the excess with a paper towel if you notice that you're immediately having too much paint. You can also take a really wet brush, so grab a brush that's really, really wet, get that paint really, really wet, then wipe it off with a paper towel, let the model dry and start again. Okay, you can do that. If you overdo it, don't worry, you can tone it down just by washing the paint off before it dries. It dries fast, so you got to move fast. But you can also just choose to blend the colors back again. Okay, so you can just get a different color and kind of just blend those colors in, put a little water on your brush maybe, and brush out those edges so it doesn't look so harsh. You can do that kind of thing. It doesn't really matter. It's just a technique. It's okay. As long as you're happy with the final result, it does not matter. Okay, so you do it how you want, but just carefully with the dry brushing. Remember, paint on the brush, then you do the boops on your paper towel. Always do the boops. Technical term. But if you don't do that, if you don't knock the paint off your brush, you end up with way too much paint. And instead of highlighting the ridges of this trunk, I would have ended up going in between those ridges and painting the entire thing gold. That's not what I want. I just want to cast a very little light hue. I don't want the whole thing gold, because that'd be starting from scratch. Then I have to go over it with washes and do some more highlighting. I don't want to do that. So very, very little paint. You can always add more paint to your brush. Start with as little as possible. If you need more, get more paint. But don't just start with globs of paint on your brush. It's not going to work. You need very, very little paint. And that's about it. Dry brushing is quick, easy, super effective for painting miniatures. Whether you're working on a whole army or just want to speed up your painting, this technique can save you time while still looking great. And that's the whole point here at this channel. Doing something that you're happy with without having to spend a whole ton of time. So for me, this looks like an enchanted tree that is going to go in my twisted enchanted forest. So I have multiple trees that are all the same because I need about 20 of them to make my enchanted forest. Because I have to make 20 of them, I am not interested in spending 3 hours painting each tree. I'm interested in spending about 10 minutes on each tree. So because of that, washes and dry brushing are our best friend. Okay? It saves you time, still looks great. That's about it for today. Hope you'll be back with us next time. Bye!